Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Hi Brian, hi Hanif.
Hello, Jared.
Thank you very much for joining me today. God, this is one of those segments that first and foremost, this channel is pretty new, and I think my brain is a bit overcharged with my giant bowl of coffee right now. I'm somehow fumbling about trying to figure out how to start this topic. But I guess I'm just going to do it the same way I sort of approached you guys about this. And today we're going to be talking about publishing, and one of the reasons why this topic sort of cropped up was that it's the new year, and I've been seeing a lot of posts about people asking about like, hey, what's the standard percentages when it comes to publishing? How do you engage with a publisher? How do you find one? What do you expect when you're talking with a publisher and all that kind of stuff? And I think it's kind of cool partially because my own experiences have been mostly with analog games, and I worked with a publisher, but the publisher was kind of new, and to be frank, it sort of left a little bit of me wanting and looking for like someone who is a little bit more experienced. Not to speak ill of anyone. I think partially because like, sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Okay.
Keep running into something. Keep hitting on my browser.
Oh, no worries.
But yeah, you were talking about someone
correct.
more experienced.
Correct, exactly. And as I said, it's one of those kind of things where, looking back, I mean, we were all learning, and this is not to speak ill of anybody, but it was one of those kind of things where, yeah, my game had some shortcomings, but maybe if we worked with someone a little bit more experienced, maybe some things would be different. And that got me thinking, about the topic that we could segment that we could possibly do to share a little bit more experiences on this kind of thing. And this is why I reached out to the two of you guys, because Hanif here is one of the main guys behind Songbird Symphony, and that game came out in 2019, which his current homepage is still reminding me of, by the way, if you ever visit it. Yeah, which means that the game has had a couple of times a little bit, him and the team has a bit time to process everything, and has had a little time to like just look back with his experiences with the publisher, to sort of like think about how that relationship or that experience could have went. And Brian, of course, your side, Spirit Games, has had experiences with a number of titles. At least, if my notes serve me right, it's at least 6 titles right now, right?
Well, 5 that have been officially released in some capacity.
Yes, thank you. Yes,
6 listed on the site. 5 that have been released.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you. Which includes like Valhalla, Masquerada, and She Remembered Caterpillars, and a few more. So yeah. So and this is where this conversation is going to start. I think the best way we're going to start, like sort of just pace it off, like let's start with Hanif, I guess. Sorry. I'm jumping all over the place. For those of you guys who have joined us, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop the questions in. I will be getting to them later towards the end of the segment as much as I can. But don't be shy about it, and just rattle on and write in what you can, and don't stop on our account. Too much coffee is really bad for you. All right.
Famous last.
If I ever die, please do put that on my epitaph. Too much coffee is bad for you.
If you ever die.
Yes. Anyway. All right. So I guess let's start with Hanif. For you guys, let's start with at least the developer side then. Hanif, for you guys, let's just set the scene a little bit. Your game. At what point did you guys of development do you guys felt, at least for Songbird Symphony, that you went, hey, I think it's time we look for publishers. Hey, I think we need help. and hey, how you guys go along about like this is the right publisher for us and this is who we choose to work with and all that. I think that's at least a good place to start the story.
Well, okay. In terms of when we thought we need publishers, Songbird Symphony, when we started, what year did Switch come out? 2017 was it, or 2018?
Yeah.
It definitely was around 2017.
2017, yeah. Because when we started development, okay. When we started development, we already knew we wanted it on the Switch, and we were like, okay, probably if you want it on the Switch, we would need a publisher. Because Nintendo and all the curation and all that stuff, and we, being a first game, we didn't know much of anything about getting games on the console. We knew there was a certification process and stuff like that, but we didn't know, how we would even get it started. So, with that in mind for consoles, we didn't really plan on doing PS4 until we happened to get the dev kit with Pixel's help. Yeah, we wanted it on the Switch, and we're like, okay, so we need a publisher for it. So about when we started looking for a publisher, let me see. So we formed the studio around 2018, near mid or end of 2018, like if I'm remembering this correctly, and we only started like sending emails and getting all these name cards, all this stuff. Actually, name cards we got a bit earlier, but we didn't really send all the emails around the end of 2018. So that was after about a year of work on the game.
Hanif, a quick question. When were you advised by anyone as to, I think you guys should register your development team as a formal company in Singapore that would be a private limited, right? Were you advised this by someone before publishers or way before that?
To get a publisher, you mean?
No, as in, were you given the advice to register a company formally before you started looking before you started looking for a publisher, or once you started looking for a publisher?
Okay, we formed the studio not specifically to get a publisher. It was only because at that time we wanted a space at Pixel, an office space at Pixel, and that required us to have already formed the studio. But
a happy coincidence.
Yeah. But we were advised to form a studio like not so early on. By we've asked around and stuff, and the general advice we got was not to form the studio as early on, because once you do, then you have to get all the admin stuff rolling and stuff like that. In terms of a private limited.
That's not wrong. The reason why I ask is because publishers generally would prefer working with a development team that is formalized and already registered as a company, as opposed to one, even like if it were a solo dev, if the solo dev says, hey, you just have to sign with me, for liability concerns, publishers generally prefer working with a registered company. In America this would be LLC, or Singapore is the private limited.
Yeah, it does make sense. It's probably like easier to handle all the admin stuff as well.
Yeah, generally contracts are more easily enforced against with and also against a company.
So it's more of a legal process for this one. Is it more a legal concern, at least for publishers?
Yes, definitely. I will share cannot name names, but I will share a minor anecdote about that later.
Of course.
We're still talking about Hanif, so let's not. I won't get now.
No, it's fine. We this is a pretty casual chat, and we can go along the way. But like, Hanif, please, since Brian insisted, do continue.
Well, wait, what was the original question other than the
Right.
when we started to
So
publishers and
you started looking around that time. But so what were the qualities for you that sort of made you sort of decide that this was the publisher that we were going to work with? Yeah.
Of course, it'll be we would like look at other games that the publishers released and gauge whether they've released similar looking games and whether those games have a measurable success or reasonable success. What platforms they've had their games on, the brand, how active they are on social, like the various like marketing channels. Also what they can offer in terms of service. Of course, we'll need console help with getting games on the console, some marketing, of course. We also were planning on localizing the games on to specific regions, so we need help with that. What else is there? Yeah, in general is three things. It's QA, localization, marketing.
Did you mention money?
Of course, money. Yes,
Money,
that's a
giving
good point. Yeah,
out the game. That's only a little important.
only a little important. Yes, definitely money, because we can't, as in other than of course not being familiar with the processes, we also can't be we don't have the funds to spend on all this QA, localization, distribution, and also we need a bit of development costs to sustain the 2 years of development that we spent on this, 2+ ish years. Yeah,
Can't develop on an empty stomach, right?
yeah. I mean, we did end up doing some freelance work, but that's it detracts away from the game for a period of time.
Did you, if you don't mind me asking at this point in time, did you, when you submitted, I think for the benefit of the audience, assume that any indie developer in the position of Joystick, that is Hanif's team, would have been, they would have to submit a budget to the publisher that they are hoping to work with, in order for the publisher to say, okay, I accept your budget and I'm willing to fund X% of this, right? Did you experience any thoughts like, we need to keep the budget not too big so that they will be more willing to sign us so that we don't look too expensive? Did you have any thoughts like that?
Like internally or from the publisher? Or...
I mean, feel free to share how the discussion actually went for you.
Internally, yes. At first, we did have that thought, like first, in the first place, we weren't sure. Being the first game, we were like, okay, well, how much is a reasonable amount? How much at what point does it sound crazy, or at what point does it sound like too little to even bother mentioning? Right. So we had to ask around for some advice on that. But we did at first, me and Kang Soon specifically, we had quite a discussion regarding what's a reasonable amount, and we were like, would there really be is this an amount that is normal? Is it definitely going to turn away a lot of publishers and stuff like that? Is that definitely there was a discussion, but from the publishers, finding publishers response-wise, we'd be lucky to get any response. Like in terms of, number one, sometimes before we even get to the budget, they don't respond. Sometimes after we get the budget, they don't respond. We tell them the budget, they don't respond. But for the ones where we gave the budget and stuff, there was no pushback from the publisher side. So in terms like for that, I guess you probably shouldn't expect any pushback because they wouldn't even respond to you anymore.
so it's a complete binary situation, right? They just look at the numbers and go like, no, thanks. They just go
no. Yeah.
All right. So, Hanif,
it is a middle ground, but it will depend on the game. So like Hanif, like you said, if the game is like not interesting and or the budget is completely out of their the publisher's range of interest, they unfortunately a very common response is for the publisher representative to just ghost the developer. It's a known problem that like a lot of publishers will just not have the courtesy to say no. But
they do have to look at a lot of games, I guess.
They do but it really doesn't take much energy to say to letters NO.
Yeah, I'm
not
like
not
well, at least explain why, right?
It's like
now you bring up a specific point. Publishers actually not Esprit not exactly included here. We do say no, and we do just say this is not in our field of interest because we have a particular type of DNA that we try to curate towards. But in many cases, publishers don't want to explain because, and I've seen this publisher reps actually say this on Twitter, in public as public information. But they've tried explaining to the pitching developer a few times, and then the developer will take it as, oh, these are the orders from the publisher. Okay, they will go back and take the advice and integrate everything, and then they come back and pitch it again, and then the publisher still says no. Then the developer turns around and says, but you told me this is everything I should do. How dare you say that this is not what you want? The publishers simply don't want that kind of liability.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, man. Yeah,
like communication.
But it's sort of understandable, right?
Yeah, I've been I personally come from an events background as well, and I'll be honest with you, I myself have been like down that route. I've tried writing to guests, and like representative for guests will go like, oh, I'm sorry, we're not interested in this opportunity and stuff like that, and then I'll do a follow up as I would to like ask like, hey, why is that the case? And then they would just ghost us, like they'll just not say anything. And I think it has to do a lot with what Brian was saying just now, which is like, hey, yeah, they just don't want to give us a bunch of explanations, and then we take it as a phase of like, oh, these are their requirements, and then we prep it all up and they're like, hey, are you now interested, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, on the other hand, you were coming at it as a service provider, right? In that sense.
In a way, but like I mean, as an event organizers, the terms are slightly different. But in many ways, we're also promoters. We're also like platform providers in some ways. So there is a bit of parallels there, although not exact. Yeah. So
I would argue that in your case, the ultimately the power, the so-called buy side, is held by the guests.
Yeah,
and
it
you're
is.
the supply, and you buy side.
Yeah,
so in this case, in the publishing scenario we described earlier, the publisher is the buy side. They hold the power, and the developer is the supply side, and
correct.
The supply side gets screwed. What can they like? I mean, if the supply side is the one that's getting ghosted.
Yeah. I mean, it's, as I said, it's not exact parallel, but it's close. In at least in the potential concerns that will come out from it. Before we continue, right, I just want to bring up one quick question that Equis was posting about just now. And Hanif, this is actually sort of related to the story that you were telling as well. So like for you at least, and Brian, please do chime in on this one a little bit, because I'm also a bit curious. So at least Songbird, right? At what stage was the game when you started sending out emails? And I'm also curious as well, like at least for Brian on your side, like when you receive emails about like publishing games and stuff like that, do you guys like see like demos and stuff like that, or is this just white papers and stuff like that, or proposals, very broad proposals and stuff? Yeah.
Okay, so I think I mentioned earlier we've been working on the game for about let me see, a bit more than a year, I think. By the end of 2018, and we already had okay. One of the first few things we did was we had a demo already out on various websites. We had a demo on Newgrounds, Kongregate, itch.io, and one other website which I can't remember right now. And not only that, we also had our awards from those websites as well. Like Newgrounds, we got did we get front paged? I think we got front paged for a few days or part of like a week. No, I think a few days in that week, and stuff like that. itch.io and stuff like that. So we already had demos, and a few months later we updated the demo, and then we got some awards with that.
He's making this sound as like it's just like popcorn rolling in. Like kind of just like we just got a bunch of rewards.
I mean, it was a very big deal for us back then. I was like, oh my god, Newgrounds was a big deal for us, honestly, because it was like our childhood, like and stuff. But we used that, and we also we showcased that to the publisher when we sent out the emails, to show we had this many hits on the game, this much, the rating was like 4 stars or 4 point something out of 5, that kind of stuff. And that was something we used to show that we already had some traction.
So it's mostly on that demo kind of on Newgrounds demo kind of stage that we were setting out to him. Okay, cool. Brian, how about
in terms of the game's content? Sorry, in terms of the game's content, it was one level, a little bit more than one level. Yeah.
Okay. Brian, what about you?
We worked the level a few times later on, but yeah.
What about you, Brian? The stuff that you receive.
So, I think I will open this by saying this differs from publisher to publisher. I can broadly say that most publishers would prefer at least some basic level of prototype. Prototype can, of course, mean a lot of things. It can, some people assume prototype means vertical slice, which is not necessarily true. But a prototype could be like programmer art plus like really really fundamental janky thing you bought from the Unity asset store. So it really depends, but from our part, we have certainly commissioned, but we've signed deals with developers who showed us pretty much like just a basic outline of the game, no prototype, just like some basic concept art and like a one-pager kind of thing. And we've also signed games that are much further in development. But I guess the central point I would say is that a playable prototype is highly recommended, mostly because I'll work backwards for what happens if you submit stuff before a prototype stage. If you try to come to us with a concept paper, like a one-pager or a GDD, and some concept art, unless you have some kind of prior game, like you've already shipped a game before that, we can sort of leverage to understand, okay, this developer has made this class of game before, there's some track record there, or it helps us visualize what you intend to achieve with your, I mean, based on your one pager lah.
Mhm.
Then that helps to mitigate some of the risk and to bridge the understanding for where you as a developer are coming from. Without that, you know, past track record, if you hand me a concept paper and say I'm gonna build Skyrim, man, I'm like, Jared, can I do? Are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
You are, but I would prefer to lower the F-bomb count if we can. The others are fine. The F-bomb count is the one I'm a bit more careful about.
Gotcha.
Because this,
Okay, we'll
so just for full disclosure, like I want this to, I after we're done with this, I'll post it up on YouTube. I don't want to get slapped with an 18+ rating, so that like I want other people to learn from this as well if I can, and I don't want this to be slapped with an 18+ rating just because of like one too many F-bombs.
Does that even happen? I'm pretty sure I've seen plenty of YouTube content.
I know,
where that's
right? But here's how crazy it
everywhere.
is. Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
really
it's
crazy.
okay.
Yeah, YouTube's algorithms are really janky, so I'd rather not run the risk if we can. But
That is
yes, as is fine. In case you're wondering, I'll do it myself. As is fine.
That's fair. You don't know what some of us do with ass. But anyway,
Oh God.
what I was gonna say, what on earth do you think I can do if you say you're gonna make Skyrim and you don't have a track record, and I'm like, what are you gonna do? Summon an army of like 2,000 interns to make Skyrim for you?
I know,
I
right?
just it doesn't inspire much confidence. It wouldn't. I mean, you most likely you will just get laughed out of the the pitch room, the hypothetical pitch room in
Yeah.
that sense, because it's just not realistic.
Hmm.
But yeah, so it's not impossible to pitch a game with just a concept paper, but you have to be riding on some really good fundamentals that from your past work. That would be that would be my recommendation if you're gonna do that. Beyond that, some people try pitching with just with a a GDD and a video to demonstrate what their game concept is. Sometimes people use videos because our playable demo is super janky, and this video gives a super clean version of that. That's fine, but I mean the video is obviously going to be helpful at helping the publisher visualize what your game concept is supposed to be. But if you're telling me that there is a playable demo, and if you say, the demo is totally not playable, even though you managed to put together a video where you played through it properly, it smells kind of suspicious. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have a lot of questions after that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, at the very least, if you have the playable demo along with a video, and you just give the caveat, the demo is super buggy, I wouldn't recommend it, but it's there if you need to play around in it and get a feel for the controls and whatnot. Otherwise, it makes me think, so did you just like Photoshop this entire video together? Because that is a thing that people do for Kickstarters, right?
Yeah, man.
So God. To me, these are some of the many possible pitfalls of trying to use something less than a playable prototype to pitch.
It also is kind of a red flag for you, for a publisher, right? Like if you tell me this and like as you said, like, hey, can you just send me a playable demo or something on some server or something, and like let me give it a try and stuff, right?
As in, and it's a red flag if you as developer don't respond to my request.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It would be there could be various reasons why that doesn't come to pass, but basically your mileage will vary. I'm trying to say that for the most part, it's more likely that this will set off a red flag from the eyes of the publisher.
I have to ask though, Hanif, did you guys try anything like that? Like, did you guys try to edit a gameplay video for like for Steam or for any publisher?
I don't think so. No.
That you had to wait for a while.
I'm
Like,
really trying to think. Did we? I don't think so. Yeah.
it's like I need Burp to bounce a little bit more harder on this one.
When we did the trailer, oh no, we didn't. There were some issues with getting the gameplay recording to be from a certain console or getting different button prompts to show up. So we might have like changed mixed up the footage from a like an older recording or something, but everything is in game.
So you had that for lack of a better term, that FF16 thing. Like if you've watched the latest FF16 trailer, they very proudly put it at the bottom there, like video is not gameplay video, or like video is gameplay video, or like from what console and stuff like that. They put it very.
We didn't say it, like specifically, say this is all in game like recording. No, I don't. Yeah, we didn't do that. No.
I actually find it very interesting that some people actually do that, but I think that's a very different discussion, at least when it comes to like marketing and all that kind of stuff.
I think it's more important for like AAA.
You're not thinking of Cyberpunk at this point, are you?
Oh god, that is another nightmare discussion, man. Like, Brian, I would love to pick your brain a little bit towards the end of this on that if we have the time, but let's keep it a little grounded, shall we?
Yes, let's do that.
Let's look at indies a little bit more and stuff like that. All right, cool. Okay, so so you've now selected your publisher. Here's now I guess the next part would be like the negotiation phase. You mentioned the things that you mentioned, like money and QA, and what else was there? Sorry, yeah, localization, and was it porting as well?
Yeah. Well, for us, we didn't really rely on the publisher for porting. We did most of the porting ourselves. It's just that we needed their help to do submissions for certification, to get the actual developer accounts and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Actually, so this was a question that was a bit high on my head because, Brian, I was looking through your stuff. I mean your website and all that kind of stuff, through all your games and things, and I noticed that you actually did publish for Linux as well. Linux and Mac specifically,
right.
Which is really interesting for me because I really didn't expect anyone to make games for. I don't expect most people to make games for Mac, let alone Linux.
Mac is still a reasonable platform if it's within reach for the developer, but Linux, I think that only happened the one time for Valhalla. Did we publish a Linux version for Masquerada? I actually cannot remember.
On your website, your website only lists one, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. My thinking is that it was for Valhalla, mostly because there were enough people yelling, and to me this I don't think in this current age a publisher needs to promise Linux primarily because there's been enough advancements that they can actually do basically emulate, like it's that usually they use Wine or something, but there's another even newer emulator that handles Windows games on Linux really smoothly now.
Okay.
At least at the indie category, I'm not going to say they can run Cyberpunk on Linux. But for Valhalla in particular, I if that was the game, I think it was because we basically said, okay, if you want it, we'll punch it out, but we're not going to. Gennady comes in with the answer. It's Proton. So Proton is the emulator on Linux.
All right.
So
cool.
yeah, I think we just said, okay, we'll push it out, but we're not gonna QA it. If you want to help us do that, sure. But this was the sort of understanding we said to the vocal proponents of those who wanted Linux.
Well, I mean, okay, so you, based on this conversation, I do hear something that's a bit interesting that I'm personally not that aware of, at least consciously. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of a duh thing, but so during the negotiations between developer and publisher, you sort of have to sit down and say, hey, I want my game on what consoles and what platforms. And the publishers themselves also will probably have their own instances in between as well. Am I getting this correct?
Well, Hanif, what was your? I'll share mine after. But what was Hanif? What was your experience?
First, there wasn't. First, our publisher was honestly throughout the whole development, they were quite like they let us do a lot of they didn't really push back on any of our decisions. They just had some suggestions, and if we didn't want to go for it, like if they said, we need this, can you make some changes to the game code to integrate the SDK for this new platform that we're gonna put it in, and if we say we can't support that, or we don't have the bandwidth to do that, they're quite they're like, okay, they just say okay, and there's not much pushback on that. In terms of the platforms that we do want, also we made it quite clear from the start that we also had it on Mac, because most of us were working on Mac actually, and we're PC, all this stuff. And like I mentioned earlier, the PS4, it wasn't really planned. It was just like, oh, we have this dev kit, and we also had help from Pixel and also our Sony representative, and setup was okay. Back then, now it's not not the same. There's a PS4, some engine version issues and all that stuff, but we told them from upfront, these are the platforms we'll be porting for, and they said okay, that's it.
And Brian?
Sorry. So I would say that we are pretty. We will support whatever the developers' preferences are for the most part, unless you say. I think the most difficult one, which didn't really work out in the end for a separate reason, was when one of our devs working on a game called Y2K said, "Oh yeah, we're going to bring this to PS Vita," and by the time the game came out, Vita is Vita's not exactly a thriving platform anymore, so the jury's still out on that one, basically. But other than that, or the aforementioned Linux version, if they say, if the dev says we want to be on Xbox, PS4, and Switch, I'm like, sure, let's figure out how to do it. Obviously that builds in more costs on our side that most publishers, including us, will try to recoup that cost. So that's something we have to help. Before this actually dovetails into contract discussions. I'm not sure if that's the topic we're talking about right now.
Oh, no, it is.
You look at of how much those ports will cost, and you build it into the contract, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it is part of what I was hoping that we can discuss a little bit more. Sorry, not necessarily go into the grains of, but I do want us to talk about, at least touch base on. Partially because I think, as I said, a lot of people who are looking for publishers right now may not necessarily know what the publishers are thinking about, or at least not be aware of what they should be asking publishers for, or how to approach publishers in general. So this is very valuable perspectives, at least for indie devs or startup devs that are interested in actually trying to approach somebody. So yeah.
Mhm.
So following up, like platform is one major part, but then I guess the next big thing I also want to ask is also about localization, because Hani was bringing up localization, and during the warm up session, he brought a whole list of stuff that at least according to Hanif Steele, there was something that he worked out with his publisher on trying to get all the localization done. So Hanif, could you share a little bit more on that one on your own end? And of course, I would like to hear Brian's opinion on this as well after that.
Okay, Songbird Symphony is currently out on Steam in 6 languages: English, French, Russian, German, Chinese, English, French, Russian, German, Chinese, and Spanish. Yeah. In terms of localization, how this was done was they had their own vendors that they already had contacts with or prior experience with, and what we did was we have a Discord channel for our games, and this was very helpful. What they did, they helped set up a direct chat with like we had all the translators in one channel with us, for us to give them quick updates on the build, also ask any questions regarding text size and stuff like that, and also we also had like a gameplay video for them to have context on for the game, like, because they can play the game, of course, but it's much easier to scroll through the video and find like which point where which characters say what, and what menu looks like, all that stuff. So yeah, that was helpful. We did have some like questions on quality control. For the most part, we trusted our publisher, because they've worked with most of these translators before. But for languages that of course we had some experience with, like Chinese specifically, for that, not me personally, but my co-founders, there was like some issues of inaccurate translations, and so it was also useful to quickly just feedback through the channel, say, oh, okay, this line number blah blah blah, this translation is not accurate or doesn't capture the meaning that we meant and stuff like that. Yeah.
It's not
And
burpy enough.
right now we're also working on a Korean and Japanese translation for those regions, and yeah, and it's a little bit slower than before, because everybody's we're working on other things as well. But yeah, localization, to their credit, has been fairly smooth, I'd say. Back then, now of course it's like I mentioned, yeah.
Brian, yeah.
I'm trying to think where do you want me to start?
Well, I suppose when it comes to like, I mean, like, I suppose most games, at least in Singapore, I would assume, and do correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but like most games will usually start in English, right? Like the base form is usually in English. Then after that, you guys get a pitch and then go like, all right, what other languages? Like, at what point do you guys go, hey, this would go pretty good in this language, or so and so? Like, and what's the thinking process for you? Because I don't know about Hanif. At least for you, Hanif, when you guys did yours, like localization, was it with feedback from
I guess I
the
didn't
publisher?
mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I didn't mention like behind like the choices of the languages that we had, like those six languages.
Right.
The languages were actually suggestion. It came from the publisher. The publisher was like, okay, we should probably be aiming for these languages. particularly our publisher is UK, EU based, I guess. Okay, I guess they're not EU right now, but um, but yeah, that in terms of like regions and what and languages, French and German, so all aiming for EU, and of course English for US. So that's for the that's the reason behind those languages. Simplified Chinese, I guess Chinese market, I guess.
Yeah.
On
I think
Steam, yeah, specifically on Steam.
where I would say the language selection matters, or what influences our language selection is it's primarily one concern is of course cost. If your game has like over 100,000 words, that's every single language you pick adds if you imagine the average price per word is like 5 cents, you do the math lah.
Actually, let me check. I have the strings open to see like how many lines we have. 2,600 lines.
That's for a reality.
And
lines, but that's not words, right?
Not single words. No, those are like lines. Yes. How many lines that we separated out just for translation? Our publisher was like quite upfront in saying like how much each language would cost, and they differ based on because they're separate vendors for each.
Correct. So upfront, I mean, if the folks in the audience are too lazy to do the math, that's at 5 cents per word. If you've got 100,000 words, that's $5,000 for a single language. And of course, some languages are more expensive than others. So just imagine if for Hanif's game, he's got the master language is English, so you start with 1, and then you've got 5 more to translate. So that's 30K in the whole immediately for the other 5 languages. Did I say 30K? 25K in the whole the other 5 languages. And that's assuming, of course, that your game has 100,000 words, which I don't think Songbird Symphony had, because so it might have been cheaper for their publisher. But for Ysbryd, we deal in a lot of narrative-driven games, so a lot of these games have a lot of text. So we have to, depending on the situation, and of course depending on how well the game how well we think the game will do in a particular territory, we will prioritize certain languages. But as I opened my statement by saying this is ultimately going to be market driven. So we're going to choose in almost all of our games, we would try to choose simplified Chinese. I know there's one game we haven't done simplified Chinese in, but why that ended up not getting the separate localization is a completely different story. But for me, like, I'd recommend simplified Chinese for virtually any game on Steam, just because like the propensity of Chinese Steam users to add reviews is extremely high.
Oh, okay.
Like, if without getting into specific examples, you'll find that if you have a good game, Chinese users are gonna are very likely to leave lots of reviews, just simply because of the size of their market. Like the problem, if you were to say, for example, and I'm making up the next number that I'm using, let's say the percentile chance of a Chinese user leaving a review was 2%, right? But that's 2% times the size of the Chinese game.
The Chinese speaking market, right? Yeah.
Chinese speaking, like the market of people who set their user language to Chinese. Yeah, that's a very specific and good observation you just made. But I mean, we presume most of them are in China. this converse is also true. If your game has a lot of issues, you can bet they're going to, or it doesn't have Chinese localization, you can bet you're going to get a lot of reviews saying, where's my Chinese localization?
Really.
BLZ.
I don't know whether it's just me, but I do feel like for some reason the Chinese speaking gamer market is particularly vocal. Like I do get that feeling that they are particularly demanding and vocal.
I wouldn't characterize it like that, but they.
Oh.
That's why I'm saying it's if you can prioritize a Chinese localization. I will say it's a double-edged sword if you're not sure how well your game will land, but it's if you in terms of of improving your commercial chances of success, I would recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I say demanding and vocal, and I don't mean it in a bad way. Like consumers have every right to be demanding of the products they spend good money on, right?
Yeah. Most consumers usually are.
Yeah, exactly. But basically, that's basically all I'm getting at. But yeah, just comparatively speaking, they do feel that they're a lot more vocal and demanding, at least online. But it could be just.
If you think about it from in their shoes, like Steam is an English person's hegemony, and they're like there are not enough games serving all these wonderful games that they can't play that their government basically doesn't allow in, but they can somehow access through illegally through the black market scheme, and you're not localizing for them. Of course, they'll be unhappy. Right?
Yeah, I go through so much trouble to get through the Chinese firewall, and you still don't have a Chinese one for me.
Isn't China gonna be a thing?
I don't know, man.
If you don't say it, it won't happen. I don't know, man. But we have to see what happens.
Yeah, man.
Oh, man,
it will suck if that comes to pass.
Yeah,
we'll see how that goes, man. Oh, but Brian, I do have to ask. Yeah, sorry, Brian. I wanted to ask you though, if you don't mind me asking that. Like, do you ever have a situation where like a dev goes up to you and goes like, "I want you to, for whatever reason, right? I want this game to be localized in this one other language," and it just like you just have to go like, "Hey, it's not gonna work, man."
There's no particular reason why I would reject a request like that if it's like if they can justify why it's meaningful. It doesn't have to be commercially meaningful, but like, look, if I'll give a say for example, if I were to work with a Italian developer and they wanted an Italian localization in their game, I'm going to say that, in my opinion, Italy is not a very lucrative market for indies to be in. They generally are not. Compared to the other major EU markets like French, like France, Germany, and arguably even Spain. The Italian games market is the least responsive to indie concepts. So, but if I were to work with an Italian developer and they said they wanted a game in Italian, I wouldn't really reject it because number one, if they're Italian, they can probably either do the localization themselves, in theory, or they can probably find a cheap and effective way to do it. Keyword being effective, because it would be better that at the very least, I think a lot of big name developers are kind of just seek out localization solutions by sending that end up doing machine translations, so that would be a good look, right? But if in the example of the Italian developer and the Italian localization, I can't see why that would be a problem. Now, if your hypothetical situation was I want my game translated into Latin, like the dead language Latin. Who the heck are you selling to who reads Latin? professor in like some uni, some seriously, it's not that would be a terrible. I would definitely reject.
Well, I'm just
But
curious, like if there's, yeah. I mean, what if? Okay, so you just painted a very interesting scenario there, right? Like, there are two follow-up questions. I have a quick one for you, like on this one. One of them is, what if it's a scenario where, like, say for example, for me, I don't know Russian, but for some reason I have a thing for Cyrillic in my game. You know, the letters and stuff like that. So I'm asking, hey, can we do a localization for Russian? But I don't speak it myself, and I have no resources in Russian, and I'm looking for help in that manner. Like, it's just purely an aesthetic choice, for example, in those kind of cases.
Can you find a different example, because Russian is a commercially viable?
No. Okay, let's try something a little bit more obscure then. Is
Arabic?
Sure, why not?
Arabic?
Let's go with Arabic. Let's go with Jawi.
The Middle East is a huge market, not for indies, but if you knew how to market, okay. So let's roll with this, because
Yeah.
I don't suspect that the Middle Eastern markets are super great for indies.
All right. So
You were saying?
So I would assume that these would be one, like, let's say, I guess any request with Arabic would be a case where you go like, probably not, kind of thing.
So what would be your justification for that?
It wouldn't be. It would be just purely aesthetic. It would just purely like, hey, I think it looks good on my game.
Why?
I like the aesthetics. That's poor. That would be poor explanation to any publisher, right?
That would be a poor explanation.
Yeah. Figure.
If you can't explain how this enhances the experience to the end user in a way that everyone in the room can agree with, then it's not a good justification.
Yeah. It is one of those kind of weird things where I felt like sometimes when there's an artistic quality that some people are looking into their games that may not translate very well, and in these kind of cases where it actually takes up resources, a significant amount of resources, it leads to a lot of questions, I suppose.
Jared, can I interject for a second?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
The thing here is we're talking about a localization in which only the said the people who speak that, who read that language will experience the game in that particular localization, right? So it's a terrible rationalization to say it will improve the experience for who? Only for the people who read Arabic. Yeah. That doesn't make sense for everyone else who plays it in English or Chinese or whatever, right?
Exactly.
It's a change that, it's a creative decision that has cost that you need to spend extra for.
Yeah. I can imagine a scenario, if I'm going to try and roll a scenario that would actually make your justification work. So let's say you are setting your game in some kind of
Arabian Nights kind of thing, or okay, fine, or Aladdin or something.
I was gonna go with like a Call of Duty type of example.
Oh, sure.
But let's say indie game, right. And your game is taking place in Baghdad.
Yeah.
So you've got signs on the buildings in Arabic. And if you say to me, okay, can we source a localization house to make sure the signs on the building actually read correctly?
Yeah.
And not some bullshit machine translated Arabic that doesn't make it.
Yeah,
like the letters don't even connect up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like the letters are written from left to right instead of right to left or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or you get
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the sake of not embarrassing the person who's the dev team, sure, we can. I would argue that would be budget for development rather than like a localization expenditure, but the principle remains.
Well, okay, I mean, like, to be fair, I was painting a very I would say a very obnoxious approach for it, for lack of a better term. Uh, it is one of those kind of cases.
Not family-friendly stream anymore.
Yeah,
because I dealt people like that before.
Yeah, I would imagine
no.
so. See, that's exactly why I wanted to do this here, because it's one of those kind of cases where I could honestly imagine some people being like that, that have instances that may not tally with the realities of what needs to be done inside, the publishing of a game. And part of this conversation is very much about, hey, why that doesn't really work, that kind of thing. Yeah. So the other thing that I wanted to ask you and talk to both of you guys about is actually, which falls a little bit more under the QA section of things, but while most games, like for most of us, would be released first in English because most of us develop in English. I would assume also as well there would be a phase where you would get like people who would do spell checking and grammar checks onto the text that's already inside the game as well, right? Hanif, would you like to take this one up first?
I don't know. I've not seen any for the final game at least. We did have some people pointing out some mistakes in the demo, or when we bring. There was once we had quite well, to be fair, it was a bit of last minute translation. We wanted to go to Busan Indie Connect in 2019, I don't really remember, 2019 probably. And people, it was kind of embarrassing for us because it was last minute, and there were people who pointed out, that the translations were not great, or yeah, and there were a lot of mistakes here and there. And we're like, well, oops, okay, luckily this isn't the final product. But for the final product itself, we haven't had any feedback like that. Or negative feedback. We did have someone mentioning that the localization for the puns were quite good in French.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we saw it on Twitter, and they were like, and they even because we included the names of the translators into our credits, so I guess this translator was a fairly recognized one, so they tagged the translator as well in the tweet, and they're like, oh, that was cool.
Just out of curiosity, the one in Busan, what language was that? What translation was that?
Korean.
Oh, it's Korean itself.
Yeah,
so
because back
it's the
then
unreleased language.
Yeah, it was an unreleased language. We haven't actually had an official, translator come in to do the official translations for the one that's about to come out. We were like, okay, shit, we're gonna bring a demo to Korea, and we just needed someone to translate the demo. I think we ourselves couldn't like check the quality, of course, and our translator was our publisher got it a bit last minute as well, so probably they didn't even get a chance to proofread, maybe. Yeah.
Brian, what about you? Like, do you guys have like much problems with English itself with a lot of indie devs?
A lot of the developers we've, I won't say a lot. I think it's safe to say about 50% of the developers we've worked with are maybe, English wouldn't have been their first language.
Oh, okay.
So there are, in the script that we worked with, there would be typos or strange expressions that we've, done our best to try and fix to a certain extent. But there's our policy is that there is a point where you don't want to like quote unquote fix the text too much, otherwise you end up potentially ruining the spirit of what they were actually trying to say, and or changing the voice entirely. And I was quite conscious of that for things like Valhalla especially. So the players often will be like, hey man, why does your game have so many we tried our very best to avoid typos. Typos, I was quite concerned about. But if people were reporting like, "Hey, this grammar looks weird," I'd be like, "Okay," but I wouldn't really change it.
Yeah, I understand.
That's, you know, there's a it's a sort of a perspective issue, right? If you come into this game thinking, "Oh, this was written by someone whose first language is English and marketed to me, a person living in a first world country whose first language is English," then you're like, "Hey, yeah, I'm expecting that this reads like it should be written for me, and therefore your English sucks. Let me, the superior being, tell you how bad your English is." That then I'm basically going to ignore that opinion. But a lot of people do recognize, hey, you know, this developer's first language may not have been English, or they understand that they actually see our point of view that we're trying to preserve the developer's voice, or they enjoy they're simply put, they will look past whatever grammatical concerns they see and just enjoy the spirit of what was being communicated to them anyway. And you know, for the most part, we don't get a lot of those people who complain, "Oh yeah, this game's English sucks," whatever. But it's a small minority report. We aim for if the developer speaks English like as a first language, then we'll just be like, yeah, we'll just double check with them. Is this what you meant? Is that what you meant? And if there is a better objectively better way to construct the phrase, then we'll amend it mutually.
Yeah. So this will always so this naturally comes into a QA QC kind of phase, right?
Yes, that's right.
All right, cool. So like, I mean, this I am also a bit curious though, and if that's the case, then like language aside, were there like Hanif, you were mentioning earlier just now that like when you were looking for a publisher as well, you're looking for support in the terms of QC as well. And I'm assuming Brian also has quite a bit of experience like trying to support some of the devs on this matter as well. Like I'm just curious about how this relationship comes in because I'm assuming that there is this phase where you'll be like trying to develop content as well as attending to QC and bug fixes at the same time. Could you just walk us through that phase a little bit?
Well, I don't really remember in which part of the development this was, but there was a period where I don't remember why there was like which deadline we were trying to go for, but there was one part of the development where even though I was doing the music and the writing, and Carlson was doing the art and the production and marketing materials, but we ended up all of us just doing bug fixing.
It sounds like a PTSD era.
Yeah, that's all that. It's like, well, I can't even remember.
It's like, what were we doing? Mine just completely blanked out.
Just say haze. All I remember is bug fixing, but nah. Yeah. Probably it was probably for I really can't remember. Something to do that we had to send to our publisher for something. But most of the I think QA. Let me try to remember. Bug fixing. A lot of the bugs that we prioritized were bugs that we needed to fix for certification, and pretty much game breaking stuff. Minor stuff. We didn't really have that many minor stuff. But there is still like maybe 1 or 2 bugs that is in the game that by this time we haven't it's been so long that we were like, how do we fix this again? And it's also not worth making going through all the patching process for. But I'd say that in terms of bugs that are in the game, I don't think there's any other game-breaking bugs left. But a lot of the bug fixing came later. Of course, during development, we do a lot of our own testing and play through. Like, we played through the game so many times that we can perfect every song. But okay, almost every song. The last song is just a bit insane. But it's just the part of the development where we devoted proportionately more time to bug fixing was when we were just trying to get it certified. Yeah.
Brian, how about you? Like, had you had a lot of cases where you actually had to support devs with a lot of QA and like bug fixing or bug issues or polish for that matter?
I just remembered something.
Oh.
There was this one bug that we really had no idea what the cause was, and we got a help from a publisher for because of their experience with it. It was so different languages actually store, or I guess different system languages. If your system's language is in European language, they would store certain values differently. Floating numbers. I think you know what. Yeah, I think you know what I mean. Floating numbers, they don't use decimal place. It's comma.
Yes.
So when if your system language is different, the engine will read the value differently. So we had issues where our the timings, because we save the timings of the song lyrics and stuff, or the timings of the song, when to press the buttons in floating points or in decimals. And when someone were to play the game in a different language, all the timings were wrong. So we were like, what the heck is going on? And yeah, the publisher was like, did you try this? Do you know about this? Being the case for different languages, like, what? That's a thing. Yeah, so they helped us with that. Yeah, we never had to translate ever, right? Yeah.
Brian?
Yeah. There's time for everyone with that was flavor of bug.
The thing is, like, information about that was not that readily available online. You really had to know what you were looking for that. So it really helped.
Yeah. To answer Jared, to answer your question, I think we are as involved in QA as the dev wants us to be. Like, if they don't want us directly plugged into the QA process and helping them out, then we will basically we'll let the developer do their thing, do their own bug pass, and we will just we'll hire an external company to run a secondary pass to verify, try and catch whatever they can't catch. Because and there's also I guess you could call it a third layer if you want, or depending on what the dev's preferences, they may insert this before we run our independent path. They may call in community testing to not to get the community to do QA for them, but more give their feedback on general balance and if obvious things are breaking before we send it off to the official QA pass to make sure that more rigorous testing is done. But was there?
I think that's actually quite important, to be honest, because like I mentioned, we played the game so many times that we ourselves were not sure what the songs felt like.
Yeah.
We were like, this feels okay to me, but when someone else played it, it was a totally different story.
Right, you get blind to your own games, right? So yeah. So I guess where I was coming from was just purely about how often or is there a SOP for these kind of things where like the publisher would go, hey, we're going to provide you this amount of testing time, or we're going to like plan out this rollout plan for you guys, and this is the amount of time that we're going to use like spending to just bug fix and test your game in QA or the game over and over again, that kind of thing. I'm assuming, and I speak, of course, this is during the negotiation process and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, we bake in a certain amount of QA support depending on what we might expect from a game of the planned size that they propose at the point of the deal. If the game, drastically changes in scope during the development cycle, then that can be adjusted or negotiated. Like I said, the scope of QA testing can be renegotiated on an agreement from both the developer and ourselves, of course.
So it sounds like there is sort of a phasic review of the contract or the agreement. Is this a time-based thing, or is it just purely like based on available one? I think it's time for us to do a review kind of thing.
No, it's not. I would not think of it as a review of the contract, but just look, game development is a fluid process, and everyone in this current chat, plus I think most of our current viewers can probably agree to that. So, like, we have to be able to. I mean, I don't speak for all publishers, but most publishers can probably expect that there will be changes along the way. Things will explode. Things will change. Like needs will change, and so there has to be a process to be able to say, okay, we will at least agree to renegotiate this if necessary. Like, okay, I mean, let's use hard numbers. If we say we're based on the deal we're cutting, we expect that we're going to spend like 20K on QA. let's say for example, right? And your game, you decide that for brevity's sake, you're cutting your game into half of its scope because it was too bloated when you first proposed to me a 70-hour RPG, and now you're like, okay, actually we can get this done in 30 and it'll be a tighter experience. So if you tell me, okay, I want your QA budget to be cut in half so that we don't have to, the publisher doesn't have to spend so much time recouping that money, that's fine with me. And it goes the other way. If your scope goes from 35 hours to 70 hours, and you need to increase your QA budget, we can negotiate in the other direction as well.
Basically, you wish you knew what you did from the start.
I mean, it'd be better if we knew that from the start, but most developers are not going to know that unless they're a very practiced hand.
Yeah, unless they've got quite a few games already shipped.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that
even then.
Yeah, I guess that's very important and very good to know, because like I think one part that some new devs who go into negotiations with their potential publishers get a little worried about is like, hey, I'm going to be looking at a contract for the first time. Some of these guys will be looking at contracts for the first time, and they'll be like, oh, is this going to be like, am I signing away my soul? Is everything going to be written in stone, and I have no space to move and stuff like that, right?
To be fair, I will say that to be fair, not every publisher is willing to renegotiate, even knowing that game development is fluid. Some publishers will be like, well, this is what you signed in the contract, we're not increasing the QA amount, take it or leave it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of really depends on the game itself as well and how much you're asking for. So I guess it's all circumstantial in this way. Would I be right?
I mean, honestly, to me, the bottom line is what's the fit, the partnership dynamic between the publisher and developer. If it's not one that is if it feels like they're not able to communicate and understand or empathize with one another, then there will probably be issues in trying to negotiate that, or have any kind of expectation of negotiation in that sense.
Well, okay. We're running a little low on time. I do want to have one last question for you guys, and this is kind of the biggie, that one that's a little bit hardest, and I think the hardest to find information on online. So we've done through a lot of the stuff, which is the initial considerations, the concerns, like localization and even QA support and all that kind of stuff. I think I'm going to skim through a topic real quick, which is, I think in general, I think Hanif has sort of mentioned about like marketing and reach as well, and I think Brian has sort of touched it as well, which is understanding the market and the potential returns for the game and all that kind of stuff. So I think we can sort of get a sense that publishers will come in with at least that experience and like the potential sales for the game, within certain regions and stuff like that. So the one thing that I guess I really want to jump into is about price setting, actually, because this is a question that I myself had a huge thing about when I was doing my analog game. My publisher came to me and said, hey, this is the cost of producing your game. This is how much of a margin we need to do, and this is how much we need to be able to make a profit and all that kind of stuff. That's how they sat me down, and we went through that discussion a bit to sort of just sort out stuff. And on my side, because my side was an analog game, we sort of upscale down the production costs to sort of meet that kind of projection. And I'm just curious, at least for you guys, and we don't have to go into exact numbers here, but like, how is that process for you guys? And as usual, Hanif, would you like to start on your end first?
Oh man, I think Brian knows because I actually had a very long discussion with Brian about this when we were deciding on the price of our game. Not just with Brian, but a few other people as well. It was internally, it was a very hard decision because we just couldn't make our minds up. Because price is also quite sensitive for like to consumers in for games as well, because there's so many ways people measure the value of a game. Not least like one very obvious way, and one that's has its own merits but its own problems, is the playtime of a game and replayability and all that stuff. And there will be comments saying, it's a 2-hour game or this is a 1 hour, 4-hour game, like why is it this expensive and stuff like that. So that's some of our considerations also. And asking people is also not the best way to do this, because I figured out I did that, and they will always okay, other than them just being nice and giving a high five, they themselves are also not sure. They'll be like, how much do you think it's worth? Or they'll be like, 15 to 20. And that's a very big difference for indie games. Or like 10 to 20, stuff like that. And but the thing is, though, we need a price that is like, we need a price that is, okay, this game is gonna be releasing at this price. Is this the price that you'll be buying it on release day? Is this the price that you'll be willing to buy it on release date? Because sometimes you'll be like, okay, I'll probably wait, a few months or until the sale or something. But this game looks like it's a $15 game, but I'm not gonna buy it at $15, that kind of thing. So asking someone, getting people to play and then asking them how much they think it's worth is not necessarily the best way. It is one way for you to, you know, I guess there's some usefulness in that, in the saying that, oh, this looks like a $15 game, maybe. But what we also did a bunch of research into other games, of course, that fit a similar-ish mold of our game. Unfortunately, that's not easy because Homeward Symphony is a musical like adventure game that's not super common. The only other examples are there being like Wonder Song and I can't really think of any right now. But those games usually were from developers who already had games out. They were already known as being, as having games that they could produce quality games. They already had a following, so they had that little bit of power there in terms of their decision for pricing. So yeah, we kind of did a compromise. I had this discussion with Brian about why certain games are priced at 15, why certain games are priced at 20, but there was very few games that were priced in the middle, like $17 or something, right? And what I kind of, if I recall what he mentioned, and what I understood was that there just isn't that many games in that price point to compare with against anyway. So it's not common, and as long as people don't put it at that price, it's not gonna be common. And people just gonna wait for sales anyway. So we ended up going with that, but also because we did our own like calculations about how many copies will we need to sell if it's at this price point for us to be able to break even at least, and that kind of stuff. They're like, okay, is this a number that's comfortable for us that we think we're gonna be able to sell? And that's one of the things we considered. Yep. Right. So it's basically calculating how much you're gonna have to sell, a combination basically. Research on other games that are similar, and also asking people who have played the game.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Brian, go ahead.
Did your have any like how would you describe the influence of your publishers?
Yes.
Just like, does it feel like you more or less decided it on your own?
Yeah.
I should mention that we at first, when we pitched the game to the publisher, we had a price point that was lower. It was like $12, $12.50 or something. If I recall correctly, I think so. But nearer to the release, they advised us to raise it. To like how much was it? 20? I think it was 1999 or 1990, around there. We were like, and we're not super comfortable with that. But we recognize that we probably should be pushing above 12.
Yeah.
So that's when we did our research, and that's when we came out with our own compromise.
And they accepted it quite. They didn't try to keep telling you guys to push to 20.
No. We gave our reasons and stuff, and they were like, okay, they understood from that.
Okay. I mean that sounds pretty like a pretty healthy relationship and discussion, sort of a culture of compromise or mutual understanding, as it were. Yeah, we try to do something similar on our end. But Jared, do you have any specific angles you want me to cover, or should I just?
I think, well, I think that's the big one, which is very much about like what are the primary concerns when it comes to like pricing, and how would you normally advise someone on the pricing on like for the sales price of the thing, because I guess when we're talking about sales price, is that final shelf price that people see on Steam or any other platform that you're putting on, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I think the first thing to think about is that yes, like it or not, a very large percentage of your audience are going to buy your game only at a discount, and so you have to build in that like your the total revenue from your life cycle based on the fact that you will sell X thousand or X X thousand units at this discounted price, 20 like 15% off, X thousand units at 25% off, blah blah blah. So if you price too low, then that entire segment of the life cycle that's being sold at discounted rate will suffer overall.
Is this all pre-planned?
So you have to build to. I mean, there's no way you can absolutely plan for it. No one has a crystal ball that says, yeah, we will definitely sell X thousand. But it's useful to be able to with the benefit of data, and if your game has a similar comparable game, which I know Hanif mentioned earlier that it's a bit difficult to find comparables for Songbird Symphony, but and imagine me back in the day when Valhalla came out, like bartending game, what comparables?
No one compares.
So yeah. Well, so to be fair, this won't work.
No, but, sorry, I was just suddenly thinking of that weird old arcade game that was actually where you play as a bartender, but that's really, really old.
Yeah. That's definitely not in the same consideration. The thing is that if you have you've got that whole discounted life cycle consideration at once, right? And then, as Hanif already mentioned, the other half is how do people perceive your game? Does this look like a $15 game or $20 game? Blah blah. The thing is that perception can also change subject to the critical perception of your game. Like, when we launched Valhalla, I am not really sure that everyone would have agreed it was a $15 game. But with the benefit of hindsight and thousands of positive reviews and critical acclaim in that sense, people may think, this game is worth every penny, whatever it is, So that's some publishers may look at this as, okay, I can justify the price as long as the critical reception is good, and if we built up enough hype, I can more or less build that perception that this is worth the higher price tag that I've attached. Once you slide into the reaction to the game is mixed, or the reaction isn't as big as you'd like it to be, then people do really start getting super critical and vocal about, is this really a X dollar worth? This game really worth X dollars? I mean, I'll give you an example. Look at Undertale, right? What's the price of Undertale on Steam right now?
I have no idea. Does anyone know? Does anyone watching know offhand?
It's $4.20.
Wait, is it?
It's $4.20.
It's like $4.20.
60%. Yeah. Normally $10.50 in Sing dollars. I think it's actually normally USD.
Oh, right. It's on sale right now. Sorry.
It's on sale right now.
Yeah.
But when this game first came out, and if you didn't know much about it, would you have thought this was worth $10?
No clue.
Probably not, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, Undertale, of course, 5 years later, everyone knows Undertale, and everyone knows that it is. I mean, for most people, it is super. Maybe they will be like, "Yeah, $10 is way too cheap. I would have paid like $30."
Yeah. Spoil market.
You can only say that with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there's an art to, shall I say, maneuvering and positioning your game's launch in a way that helps you circumvent. I don't know what the right word is here, but to really create the right the ideal perception for your game to be worth the price that you to price it in a higher echelon of pricing and be able to feel like it's justified from the optics of the consumer's point of view.
This definitely does feel like where a fairly experienced publisher can come in a lot more, like be super handy in trying to help the developers navigate this point.
I mean, experience and wisdom goes some way towards that, but like the publisher's effort in terms of how much they spend, the effort they spend on the PR and the PR outreach effort, engaging influencers or showing up at PAX or whatever trade show or whatnot. I mean, obviously in 2020 that was a very different story, but all this stuff has the downstream effect of let's say you send like care packages to influencers to say, hey, check out this indie game, man. You said I don't know what is a care package. We did one for World of Horror where we for those who are not familiar with the game, it's a like a roguelike RPG that is highly inspired by H.P. Lovecraft and Junji Ito. Yeah. So it's like, for those who are not familiar with Junji Ito's work, we threw in a copy of Uzumaki, one of his mangas. And,
wow, free comics!
Yeah. But like, just the idea is that you want people to really be able to attach themselves to the source work in order to enjoy the game that we are pitching to them, right? So that that obviously we spend a bit of coin for that stuff, but like I think there are bigger publishers like Devolver that probably go way above that.
So it's kind of a sort of a primer for them for the game and all that kind of stuff.
And I mean, this is one of many ways to do outreach to an influencer, and that the effect of those influences on the hype of the game, the aura, the general aura of the game and its value to the greater gamer market is, I would not underestimate that effect, right?
I completely agree, and
perception of pricing. Sorry.
Yeah. No. I think. Yeah. That's definitely a point. I think it's that I think some devs might be they themselves, beginner devs especially, might be undervaluing on their own. That is this role of the publisher to sort of drum up buzz for the game, right? Like it's not only about trying to develop. It's not only about making a good product, but making sure that people know about the product and people are genuinely excited about your product and all that kind of stuff, right?
That's right.
Right, cool. All right, guys, I do really want to continue this further, but we are running into we've one past the 1 hour and 1 hour and a half mark already. So what I'm going to do is, but we did manage to cover a lot of points here today. We covered stuff like, for example, localization, concerns, QA, QC concerns. How do you negotiate with your publishers when you approach your publishers? What are the things to look out for? And this is, I think, at least for a beginner dev, if you are your first time looking for someone to work with, I think this is a very decent primer for some of the perspectives and things that you should be looking out for, and at least to give you a glimpse also as well as what the publishers themselves might be looking for when you're trying to reach for them in your game, with your game. So yeah, as much as I do want to continue this, and Brian, Hanif, do you guys still have a little bit of time after this?
Bring it.
I mean,
I can go roughly as long as you want me to.
Okay,
I mean,
cool.
as long as I'm not talking about it until 2 a.m. or something.
Oh my
don't open up that door for me. I actually did that with Equus once.
God.
Equus lives in London. Me and Hanif do not.
I'm joking. So what I'm going to do is that I'm actually going to end this session. But what I'm going to do is maybe what we can do is we can move this conversation over to the lobby, and I'm going to drop a Discord link for anyone else who wants to join us, and we can just keep chatting there. Are you comfortable with that?
Oh, sure. And
okay.
Yeah, there's a lobby.
Moving the
Yep.
discussion onto YouTube. Or...
Yeah, that will obviously all
There's
that will be
Discord.
Yes, there's a
voice
Discord.
channel.
Yes, there's a Discord voice channel called Lobby over there. I'm dropping a link right now in the chat. So if anybody wants to join us, this link obviously is a 24-hour Discord link. If you come and join the Discord and just come in and just hang out and stuff. But for now, I think this session, at least this recorded session, will end. If more topics are, if you find that this thing has been very fun, if any of you guys check this out and you feel like, hey, I want to hear more from Brian and Hanif about the wonderful stories that they have shared together, or them themselves individually, please do let me know, and then we'll do another session. I think this has been really pleasant. Yeah.
Yay.
Anyway, thank you guys very much for joining us. I hope we can do this session again very, very soon. For now, I guess that's it for this one today. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, folks.
Yes.
Yay.